was saying, going into that break, that this is so much more than banking. I mean, when I left university, a bank was a place that you went to deposit money or to draw money. But now you guys have moved into every other sphere. Just briefly, Harold, just run through what services you guys do offer as private bankers.
I mean, Jeremy, as you say, banking has evolved, it's become tremendously complex, and we're looking to try and simplify it for a client. In essence, we advise clients in 5 broad areas. So we've discussed banking, which would be your private banking, your home loan, vehicle finance, etc. Also into some specialized lending needs, and then leverage needs where you're trying to assist people in buying businesses or buying out of businesses. So that would be banking. From the investments point of view, you're talking about long-term discretionary portfolios. So that would be where you have a share portfolio and you have different asset classes, so shares, cash, bit of property, maybe some government bonds. Then we have unit trust offerings and what we call fund of funds, which is how we combine different unit trusts. And then we have a stockbroking offering. So if you're looking to trade or you're looking to advice in terms of how to trade, we have a full offering around that. And that would be from an investment perspective.
Now, both of you would, I then imagine, do an offshore option. You, Mohale, through Barclays, obviously.
Yes.
And BoE would be through Fairbairn Private Bank.
That would be correct, yes.
Yeah. Would your private banker then lead you through into, I mean, everyone is saying now is a good time to start moving capital offshore. I was reading.
Depends on your objectives.
Okay, see, yesterday.
Because
right.
I think that's a very important point you're making.
I mean, there was a point where, and if you think back to the first time, we as South Africans were all excited about being able to go offshore. A bunch of people went offshore for the wrong reasons at the wrong time, and they lost a bunch of cash. And something in between over the last, I think, 5 or 10 years has changed, where the economists are saying that for the first time in a long time, the emerging markets are projected to grow faster than the emerged world as such.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you're still chasing a return, you need a healthy mix of onshore as well as offshore.
Okay.
Because the logic that says that offshore is always a good idea doesn't hold water anymore. The world has changed and it's a fundamentally different place. And also the strategy has to be developed at an individual level to say, Jeremy, where are you in your path? Can you afford, for example, to take on something where we're seeing the volatility for the first time in a long time, where the stable currencies such as the dollar, the euro and others are subject to such huge fluctuations. And no longer is it the case that offshore is a default. For example, if the level of economic growth that's expected in the established markets is in the 2 to 3 percentiles, and this is when we're talking about Germany, and everybody else is still just trying to, where are you going to get your capital growth? You're going to get it in the emerging markets. So it's about the right blend for the appetite or the risk appetite that the client has. And it also depends on what, are you looking after lifestyle objectives? And where are you actually going to retire? And all of those things.
Geez, you are so complicated, hey?
Yeah. That's why you need a good private bank, and among all of those services that you need, because it's about, and let's take your example where you come out of university, you're no longer a student, you're working. From the point where you start being able to make money, if you have a good private banker, which hopefully we all do, you should be able to have a strategy that says that, where am I trying to get to in 25 to 30 years time, and thereafter, what kind of life do I want to live? Because it goes right back to then the things that you do in the present.
Okay, let's presume then that my portfolio is quite fine here. And because the economists are now saying that the JSE is overvalued and that there are better values to be found in offshore equities, I sit down with my private banker, and private banker agrees with me that I should take some money which I have got sitting in cash and put it offshore into offshore equities. Would that private banker be able to facilitate through your partnerships of the banks handling that? So I wouldn't have to worry about that. So would they go to SARS and get the clearances and do the paperwork through the Reserve Bank and all? I don't even know what's all involved here.
So before I answer that, to come back to a point Mohale made, it's what is your objective? Because for every buyer there's a seller. So when you're buying dollars, someone's selling at the same time. I'm sure the person selling the dollars has a really good idea of why they're selling dollars. You need to understand why it is that you're choosing to buy dollars. And that comes back to your overall plan. I think around the compliance, around getting the necessary SARS approvals to go to the SARB, etc., and all the paperwork required, I mean, absolutely your private banker would be the person who would help facilitate that. And you might well want your private banker to develop a good rapport with your auditor, for example, because you might be very busy and have one phone call through to your bank or SMS to your banker. If he knows who your auditor is and they build a rapport, that would also assist in your overall planning and maybe facilitate some of these transactions.
So now you then tying it into the auditor as well. So at the come end of February, your auditor is then phoning your private banker to say, I need this documentation, I need these certificates and all the rest.
I think it's quite important for your private banker to have a rapport with all of your advisors. So you might well have an auditor or an attorney or some other person who's a trusted acquaintance you built a relationship with. Well, preferably not, but I think it's quite important that the private banker does have a rapport with with all of your
I'm now listening to this and I'm thinking this is lekker, because I really don't have to do a hell of a lot.
Well, you have to come to the party with the information. So again, that relationship is
and
very
I've got to be available to meet and sit down and talk to the.
So at least once a quarter, have a conversation with your private banker and discuss, are there any major shifts, and have an understanding of, because sometimes we don't get to plan for the things that come along. You mentioned the gynecologist. If your banker
wait, hang on. Well, I just want to make one thing clear here. Please. I don't have a gynecologist.
But I mean, issues of health, and it sounds, and it becomes, I think, in certain instances, a very intimate relationship, and friendships are not unusual in terms of to develop in these spaces. But it's really about saying, do I give this person the best chance at being able to help me get through my life, including being able to plan to say, do I have proper dread disease cover? Do I have disability? Do I have all of those things, which typically, because all of that influences, if there's an event, is going to have an impact on what happens with your finances.
Yeah.
And the more prepared you are, the better.
Okay, this sounds all very lekker.
Yeah.
How much does it cost me? Because you oaks must charge a fortune for this.
We should be, but we don't always.
Oh, that was very clever. Yeah. That was a very clever.
No, because I think when you think about and this is where sometimes the conversations, and I'm sure, Harold, you probably have the same challenges, which is when you have a conversation with clients about what this service costs, because obviously it's not a cheap service to render, to pull together all of those data points, the development of strategies, the surrounding of the private bankers with investment, risk, and fiduciary and other specialists is something that's quite fundamental to a life well lived, if you will, particularly if you've managed to get into the private banking segment. And for me, I'd say it's well worth the money, but then I work for a bank.
But now, you agree with that?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that all of the private banking businesses are facing is how do we deliver the service that we promise to all of our clients? What we're doing at BoE is we're putting down very clear service standards so that our clients have a really good understanding of what it is that they can expect. Because naturally you need to deliver your or look to your service offering based on the revenue contribution per client. And that's the harsh reality of operating in a commercial environment. But I do think that there are certain things that are not negotiable. For example, a private banker should be meeting with their client at least once a year to sit down and do a full review. So it's not a situation of a private banker delivering a credit card or checkbook. It's to say, whoa, Jeremy, we've actually got to talk to you about a couple of things. We need to make the time. So I think that is a not negotiable. And then dependent upon the complexity of your affairs and the size of your overall balance sheet, it might be necessary to meet more regularly than once a year, maybe at least once a quarter. But I think those ground rules need to be laid down with your private banker.
How many, more or less, I suppose you can't give an exact number, but more or less, how many people does a private banker service?
From a BoE perspective, it's a question that we're busy grappling with at the moment. We do not want a banker to have more than between 150 and 200 clients, because it would then be impossible to deliver that personalized service.
Okay.
And in essence, in choosing those 150 to 200 clients, you need to make sure that you've really got a grouping of clients that you can empathize with, that you can build a relationship with, and where there is trust. But I would say no more than 200 for a banking relationship.
You guys, Mohale?
It varies. I mean, there are some clients who, and it really goes back to the question that you're asking about how often should you be seeing your private banker.
Yeah.
In some portfolios, which is what a banker's scope of responsibility is, it varies in certain instances. In a let's call it a medium care environment, from about 400 people, 500, and again it depends on what the need is. Because for example, it could be that For some people, they're at a point where they need to spend more time with the investment specialist, and the banker just has to maintain an oversight role. For others, it could be in the design phase of the relationship, where we're talking about asset acquisition, and therefore how do we gear you strategically, and so it really varies. But to the point that's been made here, the attention levels are really key, and the cost to serve is a challenge for all of us, because to deliver that service requires certain resources, and it's an area where you dare not take chances in terms of the quality of service. And
I would imagine that the type of person that you would have to hire for the job would be, they would have to be a self-starter, they would have to be motivated, they would have to want to deliver, and those people don't come cheap either.
Yes, and not just that they're well skilled technically, but they need to be highly empathetic.
Yeah.
So our clients,
and there are not many empathetic bankers around. You see,
I've got to be very
please
careful.
note, neither of them answered that question. They just laughed.
But empathy is important, because through any relationship there are very, very difficult periods, and bankers need to be able to hold the hand of their clients in working through those periods. So empathy is very, very important. So it's not just the qualifications.
How many people in South Africa, more or less, have we got a number? How many people are serviced by a private banker?
It depends on where you, there's a potential market size which depends on where you put the cut. For example, if you look at saying from 750,000 Rand annual income upwards, you're talking about between 283 and 285,000 people. Known, because obviously there's some people out there who don't necessarily declare, and therefore, give or take.
And then you don't want them. If they're not declaring, you don't want them.
And it's forecast to grow to about 315,000 people by, say, 2014, 15, thereabouts, because when you start looking at how small that population is, you realize the significance of and the importance of being able to give quality inputs to those people, because they're in the top 5% pretty much of earners in the world, never mind South Africa.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's been a fascinating discussion.